The following is an exclusive presentation of Meet the Leaders, only on Optimum. We're your TV, phone, and internet company.
Coming up on Meet the Leaders, how does the 2% tax cap and unfunded mandates impact small villages? You'll find out. The Meet the Leaders show starts right now. Hi, I'm Pat Halpin. Welcome to Meet the Leaders, the show getting you to the heart of local government right here and right now. From the village of Kensington, Mayor Susan Lopatkin joins us. Susan, it's great to have you on Meet the Leaders for the first time.
For the first time, yes.
Now, for people who aren't familiar with the village of Kensington, give us a sense of where we can find this small village in Nassau County.
Well, we're part of the town of North Hempstead. We're part of the peninsula of Great Neck. There are 9 villages on the peninsula, some are very large, Kings Point being an example, and there are some that are small. We're one of the smaller ones, although not the smallest. We're right smack in the middle, right past downtown, past the commercial area.
So how many residents do you have in your village?
We have, I think, last census around 1,200. We have a little over 320 odd houses, 2 more going up as we speak. We have an apartment house with about 100 apartments in it and 1 medical practice.
So why do you have, when was the village created and why was it created? What was the history of that, do you know?
I do. Actually, we celebrated our centennial about 4 years ago, and that was quite an experience. We did a lot of digging up archives. We had some residents who were living there for a very long time, so we were fortunate to get the history. It was created as a, I guess, a little enclave that was something that you could easily get to from Manhattan.
Which is a big part of how the railroad impacted the Great Neck Peninsula.
Hugely. There was a brochure that was produced back in 1915 that talked about a weekend in Kensington and had the most beautiful pictures, and there was ponds, there was beautiful roads lined with trees. It was a planned community, and they had hired about 100 different architects who had 100 different plans from different architects, and you couldn't build a house next door to your neighbors that looked alike. And it was very specific.
Just like today, right?
No.
Yeah.
Well, we carry that tradition.
That's very cool. And what have you done to maintain that history, that architecture of old Kensington?
Well, that's actually a good question. We have a very committed and very strong architectural review board in our village that really pretty much reviews every application.
Because the tendency today seems to be, I don't care how beautiful the old home was, let's knock it down and build something new and modern and big and take up what seems like every foot on a building lot.
That's very, very good, because we found that to be the case. And just a couple of years ago, in my early tenure as mayor, many of us thought that the houses were being too big for the lot sizes and were overshadowing their neighbors, which really wasn't what you wanted to see. They were more boxy, so we introduced new zoning that gave architects some bonuses for more of a step-in and more of a angled approach, so that it wasn't as boxy. And we've heard from architects who are now building places that were knocked down that they really like the new zoning. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
And what about the homeowners? I mean, who had this vision of what they wanted to build? I'm sure you get that pushback saying, why do we have to comply?
Well, you know, a lot of people
wanted to have a bigger master bedroom or whatever the heck they were trying to do.
If for people who want a bigger master bedroom, who want an enormous, gigantic house, maybe this isn't the best village for them.
So you're saying there are other places they can move to?
Yeah, but you know, we're close to the town. We're walking distance to everything. We have beautiful, beautiful houses. We still have the highest lot area ratio than many other villages.
Explain what that means.
Well, we allow 40% of the square footage is called FAR, floor area ratio.
Right.
So 40% of the totality of the buildable area can be house. And that's a large percentage.
That's very fair.
It's very fair, and it is what it is.
I mean, this is not Queens, and nobody wants it to be Queens.
No, you need to have backyard. You need to have side yards from your neighbors. You need to have a setback. You can't have a generator, an air conditioner, condenser running next door to someone who has a bedroom there.
Now, you've been mayor for a while, but obviously you've served in other capacities. I'm hearing zoning board type issues.
Yeah.
Were you on the zoning board?
I was on the zoning board, and I chaired the zoning board.
Oh, okay. That's when somebody comes in and says, it really doesn't encroach that far.
Well, we're pretty strict. We have a very strong...
So you're very reluctant to, especially if you've got a good building code, and it sounds like you do.
We do.
To make exceptions. And if people know what the rules are, there's a reason for them.
Well, you hope that people follow the rules. You know, I follow the rules. We like our residents to follow the rules. I think that's what, you know, we should be all doing.
And people want a quality of life in villages, don't they? They want the accessibility to their public officials. They want their people move there because they like what they saw. They like the feel. They like the sense of community.
Well, we offer a tremendous community feel. You know, we have a community pool. We have our own police department. You know, we're very conscious of safety issues. We have children who play on the streets. We have kids who ride bicycles. We have sidewalks. I mean, that's a throwback to
right.
Queens if you want. But that's what people want. They want to have access. They want to have safety. When we had a hurricane, when Sandy struck, we were in everyone's face constantly with emails to try to let people know what was happening, when they could expect anything to happen. If I could have climbed up on one of the poles and turned the switch on, I would have.
I'm sure you would have.
I couldn't.
But it's also an area, as you point out, that's over 100 years old. So you had probably a lot of old trees that were that were damaged by the storm and the wind. And we know what happens when you have a system where the wires are above ground. You lose power.
Ours are even more complicated because the founders of Kensington created a village with easements going behind the houses.
Oh, so the lines are not in front of the house. That's why your streets look so beautiful.
That's probably true. And that's been maintained along with the gas service and the electric, we said electric, and water mains and sewers. Everything is behind the houses. So that makes for a very interesting challenge.
So it's not exactly as accessible as it might be.
Oh, no.
But from an aesthetic standpoint,
it's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
And our trees can grow taller on the street because they're not impeded by the power lines.
Right. Yeah, oftentimes you see these trees that look like this big V cut out of the middle.
And they're truncated, and that's not a healthy tree anyway.
And it's not a particularly attractive tree.
No.
But so whose job is it to maintain those trees where you have these power lines, going through the backyards?
It's LIPA. We actually, I've had a very positive relationship with the district people and invited them to our Great Neck VOA meeting about a year ago, and they told us if you want us to do a tree trimming program, just call us. So I called them, and they went through our village. It took about 6 weeks, and they tried to trim all the overhangers, everything that was going to impede a power line. Did it help? Probably.
I'm sure it did.
But we still had down trees on lines, and it knocks out a whole block.
So you're a small village, and you mentioned that there are 9 villages in the Great Neck Peninsula. Right. Now, some people would say, that's the problem with Long Island. There are too many villages.
Some people would.
That this is not the most efficient way to provide services, and that these villages really don't have the size and the scope, for example, to handle a big storm like we had with Hurricane Sandy.
Well, I can refute that.
Okay.
I believe, and many of us can testify and show evidence, that the most efficient form of government is local government. We are completely accountable.
How much do you get paid?
I get paid nothing.
Oh, that's even better.
I get no perks, I get nothing. But I've always said to people, I live here too, and these are my taxes, and I don't want to see my taxes go up any more than my neighbors do.
Most people don't realize that small villages especially, the trustees, all the board members, the mayor, do this pro bono. They do not get paid.
Right. So in terms of your point of local government, I know where every dollar is spent because I work with the village clerk treasurer and the board, and we create a budget. We know what we want to spend in advance, and that's what we plan to spend. And if something comes up, we try to push it off to the next year. And you have to be very careful about where you spend your money. You don't want to waste it. You want to be judicious with it because that's the only way you will control.
Now, your background is financial.
I'm financial.
You have an accounting background, you're financial, so you understand finance, and you understand that you've got to really that budget is more than just numbers on a page. It's your plan for the year.
Exactly, and there's not a lot of discretion in the budget. People really don't understand that unless they're there in the trenches looking at the details.
We have to take a short break. We come back, we'll get into the budget as it relates, especially to the 2% tax cap. So we'll have more with Susan Lopatkin, the mayor of Kensington Village. So stay with us. Welcome back to MTL. We're here with the mayor of Kensington, Susan Lopatkin, and we've been talking about government and how you pay for things. But first, let's kind of set it up this way. What are the services that a small village with 300 plus homes provide to their residents?
Well, there's a long list. We provide police coverage 24/7. through our relationship with the fire departments on the peninsula, we provide fire and ambulance. We provide garbage pickup. We provide all building department and residential code compliance and review issues.
So you're responsible for zoning and development, everything, yeah.
And we do roads. In fact, we're about to repave all our roads in about 2 weeks, first time in 24 years. We provide trees and shade, beautification. We have our own community pool, so we provide recreation. We really provide the lion's share of what our residents see.
And what they use on a regular basis. So how do you pay for that in this environment of the 2% tax cap? And we know that police costs are probably the biggest single item, public safety, that you have in your budget by far. And it's not cheap to provide police protection. You know, on Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk County have some of the highest paid police officers, and you're not exempt from that as a small village. How do you afford that with the tax cap?
Well, we've had sharp pencils. We've been very fortunate that our police, there's some amount of rotation, so when someone retires, we have a new officer who comes in who's at a lesser salary, so there's a little bit of that.
But you don't have a very big police department.
No,
how many members?
We have 6. We have 6 full-time police officers. But the police budget has really not risen inordinately. You know, we have a tremendously great relationship with them, and the contract provisions are really, you know, not as robust as
now, the easiest way to save money, I'm sure you tell your residents this,
turn off the lights?
No, well, no. I mean, have Nassau County provide the police protection.
No.
Would they go for that?
No. We actually did a study on that a couple of years ago, right before I came into office, and there wasn't that much of a savings, with a tremendous degradation in responsiveness and services. When going back to the hurricane, or for that matter, the microburst, you know.
Oh, that's right. You had that microburst, which was a small tornado landing in the middle of your neighborhood.
Every single road was closed.
Right.
We provide public works through contract. So our contractor, who I called, and they were immediately responsive, came in with chainsaws. Our police cordoned off the roads. By that night, we were open. Every road was open. It was unbelievable.
Right.
That's what you get in a local small community, where you have relationships with people and they provide services and they get paid for it. We're happy to pay for it, and it's a win-win for everyone.
So do you get the sense that people, you know, really appreciate the value of the services that they provide, that they, you know, as much as people complain about taxes, don't mind writing that check out to the village of Kensington?
I can't speak for everyone. I think that there are people who understand some of the mechanics of what their village provides.
But they know that things cost money. You're going to have a community pool and recreation programs and public safety. That costs money.
And I think the other key is communication. And we try to keep in touch with our residents as routinely as we can, let them know what's going on, what's happening, you know, just to give them a sense of ownership rather than simply, here's a tax bill.
Right.
So I think that's also important.
And they see every day what they get. How much cooperation is there between the other villages and the village of Kensington in the Great Neck Peninsula?
There's a huge amount of cooperation.
Well, give me an example of what you're talking about.
When we needed to get our streets swept just a couple of months ago, and I had read somewhere in the newspaper that the village of Great Neck had just purchased a new street sweeper, I called the mayor. I said, are you interested in, you know, do you have any downtime? He said, yeah. So we worked an arrangement. We saved some money. He picked up some money.
So you contracted with them and said,
it was a win-win for
send
everyone.
your sweeper to us and we'll pay you for it.
Exactly. So there was a no-brainer on that one. So I think that there's a tremendous amount of interaction between the mayors from the different villages. A year ago, one of the other villages and I created a simpatico relationship where their residents could use our pool during weekdays and ours theirs, because they had a tennis court. We had a heated pool, not on weekends because it gets too crowded on weekends.
But during the week it's slow.
Yeah, so why not?
So is that still in effect?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, so there's so many instances.
So people would say to you in the past, hey, we need a tennis court. You say, not a problem.
Well, during the summer, they can go over to the neighboring village. You could go over there
and play tennis over there during the week.
Right. So there's, I think, and the fact that we have a Great Neck Village Officials Association that I just stepped down as president of allows us to have an ongoing forum of not just the 9 villages, but we have our sewer district is part of that organization, our water authority, our school district, our library, you name it. You know, the park district. You know,
right.
as many entities as are there are part of this organization.
And that group gets together on a regular basis. So how do you deal with issues of emergency planning? Because the whole mantra today is you want to be able to plan and you want to anticipate, you want to be able to develop the cooperative relationships ahead of time. Prior to a microburst or Hurricane Sandy, so that when you know you need something, you know exactly where to go for it and who might be able to assist.
Well, I have to say that during the hurricane, for the most part, each village managed its own issues. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a community-wide movement, and because you couldn't, you had to do your own.
Well, of course, you have to address your own issues first.
If most of my residents didn't have power, I'm going to be on every conference call. I'm going to be camping out at the substation and get the power back before I speak to someone in a neighboring village, other than anecdotally, how are you doing?
Right.
What's happening? And sort of glean
share information.
Yeah. Right.
What about cooperation with the county? There they have the whole emergency coordination system for the county, countywide. How did that work out during Sandy?
Our village didn't really have a lot of interaction with the county.
Okay.
We had more interaction with the town.
The town of North Hempstead.
Yeah. One of our Great Neck VOA meetings actually coincided with a couple days after Sandy, and our town supervisor came with his emergency management person, and we had all our villages come, and we sort of shared a lot of information together, and that was really helpful in terms of the communication and the protocol of how to get the downed trees up, because they're there with live wires. And in the past, LIPA wouldn't allow you to touch those trees unless they had their guys there to turn off the power, but yet you have major arteries like Bayview Avenue that was closed, and you needed to get access to the north end of the peninsula. So the town coordinated with LIPA differently and coordinated with us. So that was a little bit of an improvement.
And that helped you alert your residents that that road will be open and accessible. So the 2% tax cap, many villages seem to be piercing that cap.
We haven't gone, we pass legislation every year in case we need to go through, and because the calculations are so onerous and so convoluted, we wanted to pass a legislation in case we actually went through by accident and didn't know. So that was part of our deal, but we didn't, go through the cap any of the years that it's been in place. But I have to tell you, that cap is just, it's not useful.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to get the answer to why you're saying holding taxes at 2% is not useful. So don't go anywhere. MTL will be back in 90 seconds. Here with Mayor Susan Lopatkin of the village of Kensington in the Great Neck Peninsula in the town of North Hempstead. We were just talking about the 2% cap, which Albany passed. Governor Cuomo signed it with great fanfare, saying that property taxes can't go up beyond 2% unless you have a supermajority of your board approve that increase. And you're saying that that just doesn't work and frankly doesn't apply.
Well, the reason it doesn't apply is because it's a fake cap. When we had wage and price controls years ago, that didn't work. You can't artificially cap expenses if you're not going to release some of the problems of why the expenses are so high to begin with.
Well, let's talk about the biggest part of your budget, public safety. You have binding arbitration, which means that you can't reduce anybody's salary or conditions in their contract unless it's agreed upon, or in the case of binding arbitration, approved by an arbitrator. So you're basically stuck with whatever the contract is that you inherit.
Well, we actually renegotiate our contract, and we've never, in our village, have never gone to arbitration. We're very fortunate. But I think beyond that, the problems with the mandates are little things that add up to big things.
Like what?
GASB 45, which was this recent government accounting.
Now, you're an accountant.
Okay, I'm going to say it in English.
Explain what that means.
We have to disclose in our financial statements the cost of unfunded future liabilities.
Like
retirement expenses.
And medical?
Or medical or pensions. Based on who's our employees today.
Right.
This doesn't get into our actual balance sheet. This is simply a disclosure item on your footnotes. It doesn't get used anywhere, but we had to spend, what was it, $3,500 to hire an actuary to calculate this, and it has to be updated. This is an example of a cost. Maybe for some bigger entities, it has some relevance. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But it certainly didn't have relevance to us. So there's money we didn't need to spend. For $3,500, I could plant a lot of pretty trees.
Right.
That's how I look at these things. I have to pay the Medicare cost every month for the spouses of retired employees.
But can't you negotiate that as part of your labor contract?
It's a New York State law.
Is that right? I didn't realize that.
Yes. And that was a surprise when we had to do that. Here's another example. If you have the New York State pension plan, well, in a private for-profit entity, there's ERISA rules that govern who you have to cover in your pension. And typically, you don't cover part-time people because it's just the law. In the New York State government world, you have to cover part-time people if they elect to be part of the pension.
Yeah, they'll get pension credit for that. Not a lot.
No, but it's still.
But it adds up.
So if it's a 20% cost for retirement benefits that we have to pay as a village, then if I have part-time employees, then the extra 20% is like a raise out of my budget.
Sure it is.
So government can keep taxing people and keep expanding their benefits. Private industry can't. If the government had to follow the same rules as a private enterprise, they would be out of business. And in some cases, that's what's happening.
You really believe that?
Yeah.
So in New York State, you have a tax cap. The biggest portion of property taxes, by the way, go to schools.
Correct.
I mean, we all know that. I mean, your village taxes, because you have public safety, are not low, but people want the cops.
Right.
So they're willing to pay for them.
Right.
It's just that simple.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, it is about services that you can provide. But you're right. I mean, you have limited flexibility in terms of where you can control some of the costs. Typically, those are costs that you would negotiate, like you would with a vendor or with a or with the employees' bargaining unit.
Right. That was an awakening, taking office, is realizing that there's not a lot of flexibility.
What about growing the tax base? Everybody says you could grow the tax base. You got a small village. You don't have too many opportunities to grow your tax base.
I have no buildable land. The only buildable land will be if a house gets knocked down and a new house is put up in its place. I can't think of any other
Now, some
cases.
villages especially are complaining about the fact that more and more properties are coming off the tax roll as a result of becoming religious institutions. They're being acquired by religious organizations.
This is a huge problem. There are some communities that are targets, if you will, because they're just more of there's just more of a religious nexus there, so that more and more properties are taken off the tax rolls, yet the community as a whole has to still provide all the services.
You still have to pick
everyone.
up the garbage, you still have to clean the streets, pave them.
You still have all those things you have to do, but you have a smaller and shrinking tax base to spread it over. So at some point, in my opinion, that there's an undue burden that's going on to the remaining taxpayers because they aren't, soon you'll have, just too much being spent by too few people.
So you have a shrinking tax base, and some of that's occurring in communities to a greater extent than others. I suppose there's always been that tension between religious organizations and the communities at large. It's one of those tricky things given our Constitution and the
providing religious freedom is very intrinsic to our way of life.
Right.
And we have to follow that, and that's really important. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm against that. I'm just saying that there's a tipping point, I think, that you have to look at it and measure it, because there could be a point where it's just not fair to the other people.
Okay. So do you still like being mayor of the village of Kensington?
I do. I do. It's very gratifying to get things done, to solve problems for people, to cut through red tape wherever and however it might occur. And I think it's very interesting. I learned things that I never knew, how to pave a road or how to go for bonding. We never did that before.
But you're doing it now to pave those roads.
Yeah.
That's okay. And interest rates are very low, so you got to take advantage of it to do that infrastructure work.
Exactly.
But you know, you raise an interesting point. You do this as a volunteer. You get so many talented people who you could never afford to pay to come in and volunteer time and make a difference in a village. And your village is a great example of that. Susan, we appreciate you being here. So that's Susan Lopatkin of the mighty village of Kensington. We appreciate you being here, and thanks so much for coming on Meet the Leaders.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been enjoyable.
We'll see you again. I'm Pat Halpin. Thanks for watching.